You ever just stop and think about the deepest mystery there is? I'm not talking about deep space or anything out there. I'm talking about what's right in here, inside your own head. That constant, private movie. The actual feeling of what it's like to be you. That's consciousness. And honestly, for centuries, it's been the hardest problem in science, in philosophy, you name it. So, where do we even begin?
I mean, really think about it. When you stub your toe, sure, there are nerve signals, there's brain activity, but there's also the raw feeling of pain. It has a certain quality to it, right? But why? Why isn't it all just information processing happening in the dark inside our skulls? What gives experience that subjective inner life?
Well, a pretty bold and frankly kind of a mind-bending theory called illusionism offers up a startling answer. It suggests that maybe we've been asking the question all wrong because we fundamentally misunderstood the very thing we're trying to explain.
Okay, so right off the bat, let's just clear up the #1 biggest misunderstanding. Illusionism is not saying you don't really see the color red, or that the pain in your toe isn't real. Of course it is. What it's actually denying is the story our brain tells us about those experiences, this idea that they have some kind of special, non-physical, almost magical property. That, illusionists claim, is the trick.
So, there's a fancy philosophical word for this special property, qualia. It's that indescribable redness of a strawberry, or the unique, horrible throbbing of a migraine. For a long time, people thought qualia were the absolute heart of the mystery of consciousness. But illusionism comes along and says, nope, qualia are the heart of the mistake. And here's where they make their big move. They argue that when you say something like, ouch, that really hurts, or wow, look at that beautiful sunset, that whole process, from the light hitting your eyes to you actually speaking the words, it's all a physical chain of events. It's all just neurons firing. The very fact that we can talk about our inner states is proof that they're physical brain processes, not some weird glimpse into a non-physical world. So, if our conscious experience isn't made of some magical qualia, then what in the world is it? What is this feeling we're all having all the time? Well, illusionists explain this with a brilliant analogy, and it involves something you and I use every single day.
Think about your computer's desktop. You see these nice, neat little folders, these clean icons. You click on a file, it just opens. It's a super simple, clean, user-friendly interface, right? But we all know that's not what's really happening inside the computer. The reality, inside your brain, is an absolute storm of billions of neurons firing away. It's a chaotic, unbelievably complex, messy bit of electrochemical code. But what does your brain show you? It gives you a simple, neat icon, a feeling of redness, or a feeling of pain. Now that feeling is an incredibly useful summary, but it's also a radical oversimplification that totally misrepresents the messy, chaotic reality underneath. Just like that little folder icon on your desktop hides all the complex ones and zeros it really stands for.
Okay, but I know what you're probably thinking right now because this leads to the biggest, most intuitive objection to this entire theory. It's a question that probably popped into your head a few minutes ago.
Exactly, right? I mean, for there to be an illusion, there has to be somebody who's being tricked. If my feeling of pain is just a misleading icon on a screen, well, who's the user looking at the screen? Who is the one actually experiencing this illusion? And right here, this is the theory's most challenging, most profound, and maybe most shocking answer. There isn't one. There's no little person inside your head, no inner witness sitting in a mental movie theater watching the show.
So how does that even work? Well, this is how illusionism tries to solve the paradox. There's no separate you that gets fooled. The very same complex machinery in the brain that generates the simplified experience, that feeling of red, is the exact same machinery that then classifies it. It creates the feeling and in the same breath slaps a faulty label on it, basically concluding, wow, this thing I'm experiencing is simple and pure and definitely not physical. The system, in a way, fools itself.
All right, so let's pull all these threads together. Let's see what kind of picture of consciousness illusionism is actually painting for us.
So what's the bottom line? The illusionist view looks something like this. Consciousness is absolutely real, don't get it wrong, but it's a completely physical process happening in your brain. Those subjective feelings we all have are just the brain's simplified, user-friendly models of its own complex operations. The brain is basically a self-modeling machine that generates a slightly inaccurate report about itself. The grand illusion, then, isn't the experience of red or pain itself. The illusion is the added feeling that the experience has some extra metaphysical, almost magical glow. That's the trick. And this whole idea leaves us with a fascinating and, a very modern final thought. If our own consciousness is the result of our brain misrepresenting its own inner workings to itself, what happens when we build an AI that's incredibly smart? If that AI develops its own complex self-modeling systems, could it also start generating inaccurate reports? Could it start believing it has a special inner subjective glow? Could a totally unconscious machine convince itself, and maybe even convince us, that it's truly conscious? Definitely something to think about.